We're reading back to Bat and the Waiting Game. We are on Chapter 8, titled Kitchens. There were some terrible things about Bat's new after-school schedule. Number 1, the extra time away from Thor. 2, the uncomfortable feeling of going to a new place, itching Bat like the heat rash he sometimes got on summer's hottest days. 3, the inconvenience of being away from his very own home and his perfectly comfortable room. But Bat had to admit the next afternoon, staring up at Israel Dad's massive rumbling black truck, the ride wasn't one of them. Bat had never been in such an interesting vehicle. Mom drove a perfectly average station wagon, and Dad had an uncomfortably tight sports car with a hump in the middle of the back instead of a seat. Israel's dad's truck was totally different. It was like seeing a Great Dane after a lifetime of Chihuahuas. It was the ostrich of the car world, impressively large. Tuesday's school day had ended, and when Bat and Israel walked out of the building to the pickup line, Bat immediately spotted the truck. "I think that's the coolest truck I've ever seen," Bat said to Israel. "I didn't know you cared about trucks," Israel said. "Neither did I," said Bat. "Hi, boys," said Israel's dad through the open window as he pulled up to the front line. He leaned over and unlocked the passenger side door. "Hop in." The truck was so tall that Bat had to use the chrome bar that ran beneath the door to step up and climb in. Standing on the bar, peering into the cab of the truck, Bat found himself at a loss for words. It had never, ever occurred to Bat to care the least bit about a vehicle. He liked fur and feathers and scales, teeth and claws and tails. The truck was just chrome and paint and rubber and steel, but somehow it felt alive. And peering into its cab was like looking into the heart of a dragon. "I like your truck, Mr. Zimmerman," Bat said. "Thank you, Bat," he answered. "Call me Tom." "Tom," Bat said, half to himself, as Israel's dad pulled forward the front passenger seat so the boys could climb into the narrow rear bench. It had, Bat noticed with satisfaction, 3 seat belts. He plopped himself happily in the center seat, latched his belt, and said to Tom, "Tell me everything about this truck." By the time they pulled into Israel's driveway 10 minutes later, Bat knew the difference between a V8 and a V6 engine. He knew what a drivetrain was and why it was better to have 4-wheel drive than 2-wheel drive. He knew that Tom's truck could tow up to 12,000 pounds. "Give or take a few," Tom said. And he knew with 99% surety, because that was as sure as you could be about anything, that one day he would drive a truck exactly like Israel's dad. Tom put the car in park and turned it off. "Here we are," he said, which normally would have prompted Bat to say something about how that was the kind of statement that really didn't mean anything, because it's always true. You could always say, "Here we are," no matter where you were, and you'd be right. But Bat didn't point that out this time. "Thank you for driving us," he said instead, remembering his manners, like Mom had told him to do. "Any time," Tom answered. And then he said, "You're a cool kid, Bat." That was definitely the first time anyone had ever called Bat cool. Bat followed Israel into the house, putting his backpack on the kitchen counter next to where Israel set his. Bat looked around as Israel slammed open the pantry and rustled through it, looking for a snack. It was a very different kitchen than the 2 kitchens Bat were most used to. His kitchen at home had almost empty countertops tiled in plain white squares. There was a bowl of fruit and a toaster, and that was about it. Everything else Mom kept put away. As she said, habit from keeping a clean operating room. The kitchen at Dad's apartment was pretty empty too, but for a different reason. He had only lived in the apartment for a year and a half, and he really didn't have much stuff. Israel's kitchen would have made a terrible operating room. The countertops were blue, but it was hard to tell under all the stacks of colorful ceramic bowls and cups and plates that were piled all over them. The walls were light yellow, but it was hard to tell under the pictures that were hanging, some framed, some loose taped up sketches all over them. Israel emerged from the pantry with a bag of pistachio nuts, a box of cereal, and a chocolate bar. "Do you want a snack?" he said to Bat, the first words he'd spoken since they'd left school. "Or do you just want to go hang out with my dad some more?" The chocolate bar looked delicious. "Snack, please," Bat said. Chapter 9 is bowls. Bat had never eaten a bowl of cereal without milk before, But Israel poured half the box into a big gray and pink bowl and then poured a bunch of pistachios into a slightly smaller green bowl with swirly blue curlicues all over it. Then he put away the cereal box and the bag of pistachios, told Bat grab the chocolate bar, and headed out into the backyard. Bat, chocolate bar in hand, followed him. "Wow," he said, standing in the doorway looking into the yard. Israel was placing the 2 fancy bowls of snacks on a table underneath a big shade tree, but that was the least interesting thing happening in the yard. Bat counted 11 pinwheel wind spinners planted in the garden beds all around the yard. Some had bits of colored glass suspended in webs of metal. Others were all metal, but a mix of copper and silver. Big, bright glass orbs were tucked everywhere, glints of shiny color under the tree, lining the path through the yard that ended at a garden shed. The shade tree's branches were heavy with stained glass ornaments and wind chimes that filled the air with silvery tinkles and deep vibrating clangs. There was so much to see and hear that felt caught between it all. The colors, the sounds, the newness of everything. Suddenly, despite the beauty and excitement of Israel's amazing backyard, Bat wished desperately that he were home. "Hey," Israel said, "are you okay?" Bat felt himself bouncing on the balls of his feet, and he knew his eyes were full of tears. He still clutched the chocolate bar in his hand. "Sort of, not really," he said. Israel scratched his head. "Come on," he said, taking the chocolate bar from Bat and setting it on the table. "I'll introduce you to my mom." But instead of leading Bat into the house, Israel walked through the garden to the shed. As they crossed the yard, Bat took deep, calming breaths and wiped his eyes. The shed door was open, and as he got closer, Bat saw that it wasn't just a place to store shovels and rakes. "Hey, Mom," said Israel. "You're home," came a voice from inside the shed. "Is your friend with you?" "Yep," said Israel. "Bat, come say hi to my mom." Bat peered into the shed. Israel's mom was in there, surrounded by shelves full of bowls and cups and plates and pots, some glazed in bright colors, others the flat gray of unfinished clay. She was sitting behind a potter's wheel, a lump of wet clay in her hands. Splatters of clay decorated her arms and her overalls. "Hi, Bat," she said. "I'm Cora." "Hello," said Bat. "What are you doing?" "I'm making a bowl," Cora said. "Do you want to try?" Bat shook his head. "I don't like slimy things," he said, "or sticky things." He looked around at all the shelves and all the things upon them. "Did you make all this stuff?" "Most of it," Cora said. "Over there is Israel's work." The shelf she pointed to was filled with lumps of clay that looked a lot like the lump of clay Israel had made for Bat, which Bat had right then tucked into his pocket of his vest. "Mom's stuff is better than mine," Israel said. "She's a professional artist. I'm just starting out." Bat looked back and forth between the pottery Cora had made and the awkward lumps Israel had made. "Yes," he said, "your mom's stuff is way better." Israel crossed his arms across his chest. Bat felt his stomach rumble and said, "I think I'm ready for that snack now." And Chapter 10 is Missing Connections. Mom's perfectly average station wagon felt decidedly less than average that evening when she collected Bat from Israel's house. "So, how was it?" Mom asked, putting the car in reverse to back down the driveway. "Mom," Bat said, "have you ever thought about getting a truck?" "A truck?" Mom said. She shifted into drive and stepped on the gas. "Yes," said Bat, "a big one." "Actually," Mom said, "the first car I bought when I was 18 years old was a truck." "Really? Was it like Tom's truck?" "Tom?" asked Mom, glancing over at Bat. "Israel's dad," said Bat. "Ah, I didn't realize you were on a first-name basis." "It's no big deal," Bat said. "Tom is cool." Mom laughed. "Careful, or you might make me jealous. You've never called me cool." "Anyway," she said, "did you have a good time with Israel?" "Mm-hmm," said Bat. Then he realized that he hadn't yet asked about Thor. "Oh," he said, "is Thor okay? Did you remember to give him his 4 o'clock feeding?" "Of course I did," Mom said. She flicked on her turn signal and made a right onto their street, Plum Lane. "Thor is great. He's in the back." "You put Thor in the trunk?" Bat's voice went high and squeaky with indignation. "He's just fine," Mom said, and she pulled into their driveway, put the car in park, and turned the key. Bat unlatched his seatbelt, threw open his car door, and ran around to the back of the car. He clicked open the rear door and pushed it up. "Oh," he said. There was Thor's travel carrier, a second-hand cat kennel, but there was something else back there. A plastic gate or fence or something. "It's a doggy pen," Mom said. "Someone donated it to the clinic today, and I thought we could use it for Thor. What do you think? Want to help me set it up?" This pen, Bat thought, was even cooler than Tom's truck. They got the sections of the pens, 4 plastic sides, it turned out, to form a square into the house. Mom tried to set the 2 pieces she was carrying down in the living room, but Bat carried his 2 sections all the way down the hallway and into his bedroom, where he intended to build it. Then he immediately started trying to figure out how to connect them together. "We can do it later, Bat," Mom said, standing in the doorway of his room. "After dinner and bath time." "I want to do it now," Bat said, all his concentration on hooking the pieces together. He could see through that something was missing. The 2 plastic panels just wouldn't latch together. "Are there any more parts?" he asked. "I don't think so," Mom said. And she came into Bat's room to see what the problem was. "Oh, there must be connecting rods that slip into the edges here to hold the sections together. I don't know, Bat. Maybe they're at the clinic and I didn't see them." "We have to go back to the clinic and find them," Bat said. "Not tonight, honey. It's getting late. We're all done being out in the world for today." "We have to build the pen for Thor." Bat felt the anxious knot tightening in his chest the way it sometimes did. He knew he should walk away from the problem and take deep, calming breaths. But he didn't want to walk away from the problem and take deep, calming breaths. He wanted to fix the problem. "But," said Mom, "you've had a long day, haven't you?" She knelt down beside him and took his hands in hers. She squeezed his hands and released, her signal to him that she was going to try to help him calm down. If he didn't want the help, Bat knew he could take a step away. But he stayed still. His mom moved her hands to his wrists and squeezed and released, and then she worked her way up his arms, squeezing his forearms and his elbows and his biceps and his shoulders, and then working her way back to his hands. "Baby," she said, and it was the word that pushed Bat over the edge. He wasn't a baby. He wasn't anywhere close to being a baby. Thor was a baby, and Bat was his caretaker. And right now, he wanted to take care of Thor by building his playpen. And if that meant getting back to the clinic, even though it was closed for the day, then that is what they should do. And Bat didn't understand why Mom couldn't see how important this was and how right he was and just do what he wanted her to do. "Bat, honey, shh," Mom said, and that's when Bat heard the sound he was making. He hadn't noticed that he'd started making the sound, the high-pitched whine that seemed to come out of him when he was the most upset, when he had reached the end of his rope, as Mom called it. But even though he hated making the noise, he felt good to make it, just as it felt good to bounce on the soles of his feet. Mom's hands were still squeezing Bat's arms, and then she put her arms around him, pulling him close. And she held him just like that, in a nice tight hug, and Bat wanted at the same time to pull away from her and to never let go. She held him until he stopped needing to make high-pitched whining sounds, until he stopped needing to bounce on the soles of his feet, until the knot in his chest began to relax and unwind. Then she said very softly, "Come on, Bat, let me run a bath for you." And Bat let her take him away from the pen. And next time we will read Chapter 11, Banana Fish. Have a good afternoon.